Okay, now to start, let me tell you a little bit about our audience here, because we have people from all over the world, literally, and they all have a broad interest in common, and then they have so many differences it would be a joy to count them, but that's not what we're here to do. The broad interest is they're interested, they see the importance of ideas in trying to develop and support cultures of freedom so that we can act on our judgment and pursue our values and live. And we all want to flourish, which is the reason that we want freedom. So the conference is really all about ideas for freedom and flourishing. And that's what we're interested in. And of course, it's what undergirds and supports those things is a very complicated question. But that's what we're here to talk about. And of course, this dovetails beautifully with the work that you do. So I think we can have a great discussion that'll be fruitful for all of us.
Despite the fact that I haven't read The Fountainhead, which I was embarrassed to confess to you.
Yes, she did confess that to me, and it was a moment. I felt like a priest there dealing with it, but she's now inspired to read.
This is on my reading list. We do have a 9-month-old at home, but I will find time.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's get into it.
All right. It's interesting, though, that we're talking about the audience here, because this audience is largely between the ages of 18 and 30. I mean, there are other people, people from my generation are here as well, but we've really tried to bring in as many young people as possible. And that goes to the reason I invited you, because I was absolutely blown away by the talk that you gave at the University of Austin to the first class there. If you haven't read this, it's titled The New Founders America Needs. You can just search that, and it's now posted at the FP, right, at the Free Press. You need to read this, not now, we have other things to do now, but I do want to read the closing lines of this speech, because this is, I actually came to tears when I read this, because first of all, the whole speech is very powerful, but then the positivity here just got me, and I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. So Bari says, after giving this just beautiful speech about the power of the mind and the potential of these young students getting into this university and getting started, she says this: "Don't forget, more than a dozen of the actual founders were 18th century millennials under the age of 35. So don't tell me that small groups of young people cannot transform the world when they made ours. If you're in this room, there's a very good chance that you are one of our new founders. I can't wait to see what you build." Isn't that nice?
I feel like I'm with my people. Like, am I an objectivist? I don't know what's going on. I'm loving this. But I also feel like a little bit like I'm at my funeral. That was the nicest introduction in the world.
Well, anyway, trust me, if that moved you at all, read the whole speech and you'll see. And I think you are with your people, so I think that's a good. So given that we have this substantially similar audience, although more international, but by age and I think by interest, I want to sort of delve into more deeply this business of the idea of the new founders, or perhaps the new intellectuals, or the new thinkers who can help us to move into a brighter future. And I want to talk about what are the characteristics of those kinds of thought leaders, and what are the qualities and the ideas that you think are kind of fundamental to this?
Well, I think it begins, I've been thinking a lot about the word objective on the plane right here. I was actually in Texas yesterday teaching to the second summer school class of those same students who I spoke to in the speech you just quoted, and I feel unbelievably energized because I know Gen Z gets this horrible rap, but I basically only love hiring people from Gen Z because I find they're so generative and free-thinking, unlike, I'm an elder millennial, a little bit unlike the millennials. I think it begins with looking at the world as it actually is. And that is a harder thing to do than you would think, because we're living in an age of doublespeak, and we're living in an age really awash in, if not out-and-out lies, soft lies that we tell ourselves about the world. And I think one of them is the very simple observation that the world that I'll speak for myself, the world that I was born into is simply not the world that I'm currently living in. And that's not just because of AI. It has to do with, and maybe we'll talk about this a little more deeply, Craig, but the ideological transformation of many of our institutions, right? One of the great stories right now in American life, and maybe in some of the other countries you guys are coming from, is that institutions that we once regarded as Teflon strong, in my experience, the New York Times, I decided to leave because I felt like it was a newspaper that claimed to be about the pursuit of truth, about holding up a mirror to the world as it actually was. And instead I found that it was often, unfortunately, about telling an audience what they wanted to hear. It was about reflecting a kind of dream world rather than reality, and that's simply not the job of journalists. That's maybe the job of activists or preachers or propagandists. But you could say equally the same thing about some of the great universities. You could say it if you're looking clearly enough at parts of the world of medicine, of psychology, of the law, of certainly of our schools and what's being taught there. And so there's like this feeling I have, and maybe some of you in this room have, that we're living on shaky ground, that we don't have the luxury of sort of, sleepwalking would maybe be a word for it, sleepwalking through our lives. I was with a brilliant historian yesterday, Walter Russell Mead. If you guys don't read him, he writes the Global View column for the Wall Street Journal. And he said something that had the hair on my neck standing up, where he said, I was born, he said, into a post-war world. And over the past decade, I feel like we've moved into a pre-war world. And how can I, as a teacher, he was saying, train young minds, inculcate citizens in virtue and goodness and truth so that they're ready for that world when it comes? And I have that sense, and maybe many of you in this room do. And so when we talk about leadership, I think a lot of it is rising to meet the moment that we're in. And what does that require of us? I think it requires a few basic things that, feel in our current culture countercultural or even radical in some sense. One of those things is resisting nihilism. I think that there is a tendency, and it's not the purview of any political side. I see it very much on both sides, and I see it often among some of the most highly educated, sophisticated people I meet, this sense that America is in inexorable decline, and there's nothing we can do about it. This sense that things are broken and unraveled, and so we might as well, sort of take off to the hills with great literature and great wine and watch it all burn. And I just feel with every fiber of my being an utter rejection of that. And I think if you want to be a builder in a moment that requires building in this country and really in so many places around the world, you have to utterly reject that mentality. Yeah. The paradox is that rejecting that requires a feeling of aspiration, a sense that things are broken and we need to make them better. But that, strangely for me, lives in tension with another quality I think is so important, and that is the quality of gratitude. And what I mean by gratitude is not a sense of, coasting along because things are so great, obviously not. What I mean by gratitude is this sense that the lives that we live, and I'll speak for myself, I'm gay, we have a daughter, we live in Los Angeles, I'm proud and out as a Jewish woman. I often wear a Jewish star in public, and I am able to walk down the street of of any American major city and most small towns, holding my wife's hand with our child, wearing a Jewish star. That reality of my life is not only unthinkable in most of human history until literally like 5 seconds ago. Yeah. Not literally, but figuratively. Yeah. But also in most places around the world in this very moment, right? You named a bunch of awards I had gotten that that praise me for my courage. And it's a touching thing to have gotten those prizes, but I'm uncomfortable with it only because courage is people that took up arms to fight for freedom in the West. Courage is people like my ancestors, and I imagine the ancestors of almost everyone in this room, who fled the tyranny and the unfreedom and the fear of countries in order to live in freedom in this one. That is courage, right? My courage is that I was able to summon up a little bit of strength to give up the prestige of working at the New York Times. My courage is the ability to get dogpiled on Twitter. If that's courage, we're in a pretty good spot, in my view.
Yeah, well said.
And the last thing I'll say to that question is curiosity. I think that it is a crucial virtue, I think, to be able to do the things that I'm talking about. Curiosity about other people, curiosity about their worldview, curiosity about the changing world, curiosity, I'm thinking in the past week, what I've been delving into, which is, AI and what it means for I'm a Luddite, but trying to understand AI and what it means for the future of human dignity, human work, truth, the ability to discern fact from fiction, like that quality, I think is really undervalued right now. So those are just some of the things that I think about. But I imagine that if you're in this room and you're interested in questions about freedom and flourishing, then you're probably already a long way toward the kind of leadership I think we need right now.
I think all of that sounds spot on to me, but curiosity is not a word that had come into my mind as something that I would have used as an answer to this, but I think it is really key in this regard. To be curious means to ask questions. That's what you're doing when you're curious. What is this thing? What is that thing? Does that make sense? Is he making, or whatever. And that very act of asking questions is the act of thinking. And that's what thinking is. It's asking, is this
exactly.
true? Or what
it's
is
like,
that thing? Or,
It's free speech, I feel like, has sort of become a little bit of like a pablum or a slogan. But free speech is the tool to get to truth. And free speech, you cannot have free speech without free thinking, free thought, curiosity, and open inquiry. So, I find myself often arguing for free speech, but really on a deeper level, I'm arguing for the ability to think freely.
Yes.
And curiosity sort of underlies that. And I think often right now and myself included, we're incentivized to be certain, and we're incentivized to plant a flag for one cause or another, one, tribe or another. And I think that, I don't know if this is a personality trait or just the way I grew up, I'm not sure, but I feel a still small voice inside of me when I see the majority of people running in one direction. I stop and say, I don't know if that's right. And that sometimes gets me in trouble, but I do think that is an important quality in a moment where it feels like we have mobs rushing in one direction and then the next day rushing in another, swirling around whatever the current thing of the day is.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit of circumspection, a little bit of curiosity, and by which I mean, just open-mindedness, I think is important right now.
Yeah, well said. So on the issue of free speech and curiosity, this all really beautifully segues into my next question, and I wanted to talk a little bit about reason and free inquiry and sort of the relationship between the two, and you've already gotten into it, because the reason we need free speech is so that we can exercise our minds. And the founding fathers, who you're obviously very fond of and are calling for future founders, held that reason really is our means of knowledge. I mean, Jefferson said, fix reason firmly in her seat and call to her tribunal even the existence of God. And he said that reason and free inquiry are the only ways that we can determine what is true and what is false. And these really seem to me to be the fundamentals, reason and free speech, that the things that we most need to protect and uphold. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts, perhaps more broadly, on that and ways to do that?
Wow. It's a fabulous question, and I'm impressed at the way you quoted that from memory. I will work on doing the same for other phrases. I have the worst memory. There's a few things that come to mind. One of them is that, I don't think people, because it's almost like a luxury belief to think that we don't need free speech. And what I mean by that is that, how do people think it used to work before we had that thing? How did human beings used to resolve conflict if they got in a fight over something? They would kill each other. That's the answer. And so the idea that, people roll their eyes, like free speech, right? Or it's somehow become coded as like a conservative idea in some way, which is insane to me, considering that every progressive social movement in this country achieved what it's achieved because of free speech and moral suasion. But anyway, I just feel like we need to help remind people sometimes that the reason that tool is so important is because without it, there's no conflict resolution, there's no innovation, there's no truth, fundamentally, right? If we can't use speech, and speech again is an expression of open inquiry, where are we? I don't even want to imagine where we would be. The question, the other part of your question, which is how we recover it, is the much harder one, because we're living in a world in which I don't think we have come close to touching the tip of the iceberg of what it means to live through such a technological revolution. One that I believe ultimately will make the Industrial Revolution seem like child's play when AI is said and done, and all of the other things that are around the corner. If you guys haven't read Tim Urban's book, by the way, it's really great. It's a self-help book for societies. It talks a lot about this. So in part, what it means on this question, the question of speech, is that we're now living in a world, and every young person in this room will know this even better than me, because you're all digital natives, is that we live in a world in which everything we say, utter, sing, photograph, is recorded forever. So what does that mean when it comes to taking intellectual risks? What does it mean when it comes to taking artistic risks, political risks, anything that requires becoming a human being, that requires becoming an adult, certainly that requires becoming a better writer and a journalist? I don't know if I would have had the career that I've had if I had grown up in a world where I knew that singing along to the wrong song in a TikTok video when I was 15 years old could get my college admissions rescinded. And that's a real example. There are tens of thousands of examples like that I could cite for you. It's changed everything, this fact that we live in a kind of panopticon. So I think that we're just at the beginning of grappling with that. It's like we have the technological change, but we don't yet have the cultural software update required to live in it. I was editing a story just before I came here about what's happening in the world of high school debate. I don't know how many debaters or former debaters are in this room. I suspect there are some of them. And debate used to be the way that some of our future leaders, to say nothing of just being a good future citizen, would sharpen their tools of rhetoric and the ability to argue and public speak. It's such an incredible thing. Now, in the world of high school debate, you have the judges that are judging the biggest debate competitions in the country, telling students that they will dock them points or even kick them out of the competition if they find something that the kid has ever uttered on social media that the judge finds somehow beyond the pale. That's insane. You know, the whole idea of debate is you're supposed to be able to argue both sides. This is happening at every level of society. And so I think one of the big questions facing everyone in this room and certainly facing leaders is, how do we allow for human beings to change? How do we allow for forgiveness and second chances? How do we allow for people to change their mind in a world in which everything is recorded and anything you've ever done can somehow come back to haunt you? And so one of the things that we're seeing also that really worries me, it's like the canceling is the least of it. The canceling is just the thing you see. The deeper thing, the point of the canceling is to send a message to everyone else. Step out of line and you could be next. And so what is the natural human result? It's self-preservation. And it has led to an unbelievable epidemic of self-censorship. At this new university that I'm on the board of, the professors, and they're incredible professors, Chicago, NYU, Bard, that come to teach at this fledgling university that doesn't even have real buildings yet. And they always ask the students, how many of you self-censor in your regular classroom, in your home institution? 9 out of 10 kids raise their hand. And these are some of the most free-thinking kids in American life. They're choosing to go to a place like this. So that's, I think, one of the core things we need to grapple with. And a little bit, sorry to be long-winded, I think a lot of this comes back to that word courage or that word bravery. You know, I'll tell one little story that really fundamentally shifted my mind on the question of bravery and courage, which is just before COVID, I had the incredible opportunity I was in Jerusalem, and I got to meet with one of the great heroes of the 20th century and one of my personal heroes. It's the Soviet dissident Natan Sharansky. I'm just curious, how many in this room know his name? Okay, for those who don't, I highly recommend his memoir, Fear No Evil. I promise you, I will read Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, but you guys have to read this memoir. And it's about the more than decade he spent in the Gulag for the crime of wanting to immigrate to Israel and leave the Soviet Union. He did unbelievable things to stay sane, like play chess games in his mind. And I said to him, you're the most brave person that I will ever meet in my entire life. And I've met some brave people, including Ayan Hirsi is a good friend I know spoke here last year. But you're one of the bravest people, Natan, I said, that I will ever meet. And I feel like we're living through an epidemic of cowardice for very, very sane and understandable reasons. How do you teach people to be more brave? And he paused like for a moment, and he's very impish and very funny, and he goes, Bari, you can't teach people how to be brave. All you can do is show them how good it feels to be free. And that, was such a wise and true answer. Because when I think back to my own life and the kind of role models I had that allowed me to have what little courage I have, or allowed me to understand that being free is better than being popular. Being free is better than having prestige, right, for example. That's what changed everything for me. And so I think it's incumbent upon anyone in this room, and all of you know the context you're in better than I can, to, show people how good it feels to be free, because that is a contagious thing. And I know that those kind of models changed my life, and who knows what lives those of you in this room could touch by doing the same.
Yeah, I like that idea very much. Modeling what freedom looks like, not just culturally, but at a personal level. What does it mean to be able to both speak your mind and live your life the way you see fit, and how good that feels? I think this ties into the importance of teaching the rising generation, and young kids, actually, really young kids need this more than anyone, and that's the real urgent point, is teaching children that their minds are efficacious, that their minds work, And the opposite of this is the kind of parenting and schooling, which is, I'm going to tell you what's true, and then you accept it. So and this comes from a lot of religions that are dogmatic, and it comes from teaching methods that are not respective of the need for a child to learn inductively, but rather is going to quote, learn by being told what's true. And I think if children are taught that their minds work, one of the things that comes with that in time is what we call courage, but will feel to them like, well, I can think that through, so I'll do that and then I'll tell you my answer, rather than, oh, I need to muster the courage to challenge the opposing view here. I think when we feel like we need courage to do things that are trivial relative to people who, stormed the beaches at Normandy, right? When we feel that we need the courage to do that, I wonder if what's going on is we doubt the efficacy of our mind. We doubt the ability of our own selves to determine what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's false. So we feel like we've got to muster something to go with it. If you really had a solid conception of yourself as being able to think, not knowing everything, that being efficacious in thinking does not mean that you're omniscient. It just means that you do know what you know and your mind can think through things. So I wonder if there's some connection there, and just teaching kids about how that their minds can work and how to learn, which, for instance, the Montessori method does beautifully. You have a child. I don't know if you guys are going to be putting
do Montessori?
Of course you should do Montessori. Yes, we can talk about that later. But yes, because Montessori does just this. It teaches children to interact with the world on their own and make things happen on their own so that they can see that they're able to do that they're able to learn, that they're able to get things done. And I'd never made that connection before between courage and whether you need more courage or less of that thing, the more efficacious your mind is and the more you're conscious of that. So anyway, it came to my mind as you were saying that, and it sounds very
well, I need to learn more. Okay, I'm like having a list of things that I need to read and learn about. I'm adding Montessori toward it, in addition to the books I need to buy when I walk out of here. Yeah, I mean, I look, we could have a 4-hour conversation about the American educational system. I don't know if you guys saw the stats that came out this week about it's, especially among Black American students after COVID, the numbers are just absolutely abysmal when it comes to basic skills like math and reading. And, I was one of those people who was accused of being, heartless because I suggested maybe that locking kids out of schools, given the kind of virus that we knew it was after a few months in, maybe wasn't the best thing. I think that argument has largely been vindicated. So I have to think about whether or not what you just said, it resonates with me. I have to think about it. I definitely think, though, that, I think I underestimated, and this a little bit connects to one of the ways my own mind has changed about a deep question, which is like human nature over the past few years, is I think I used to be a bit more optimistic. And fundamentally, I still am an optimist overall. But the idea that, people are just reasonable and people will do exactly what you just said, use their mind to come to the conclusion that the facts observable and logically lay out. But one of the things that I feel that we saw in the pandemic was that people are much more herd-like than I would have understood. And that makes sense. Like, we're social animals. But I think that I underestimated that. And I think a huge part of why people nod along happily to things that they hear that are lies is not because they don't know that they're lies. They know it's a lie when people say that math is white supremacy, right? As they are in taking algebra out of the schools in San Francisco. People know it's a lie when they hear people say America is a singularly evil nation and Lincoln is not a hero but a villain. Come on. People know it's a lie when they hear people say that there are no differences between men and women. I mean, come on. So you have to ask yourself, why are people going along with it? I think the reason people are going along with it is because the social consequences for deviating from whatever the new orthodoxy is and the rules of it grow by the day are real. I've lived them. It's that new orthodoxy, and now I'm talking about the left because that's the context I've lived my life in, but I could easily be talking about the right. The rules would just be different. Is severe. So it's my career is different. The city I live in is different. Some of my friends are different. There's a heavy price to pay, and it's not heavy storming the beaches of Normandy heavy, but it's real.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think to themselves, should I really die on that hill? Yeah. But at some point, I think what people don't realize is, like, you're run out of hills if you never choose one. And so part of my own challenge to myself, and definitely the challenge that I try to give to the people, my colleagues in my company, is, principles aren't like money. You don't need to be stingy. You don't need to hoard them. You can die on a lot of hills. You can defend a lot of witches. And the more you get used to doing that, the easier it will become. When the moment is hard, when you know that you're going to be cast out from a certain cool table in the cafeteria, you'll be able to do it because you'll have the repetition.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this ties back to something you said earlier about showing what it feels like and looks like to be free. The herd mentality is unfortunately rampant, but it's not everyone, right? There are, and were during the pandemic, people who are saying, well, wait a minute, let's really look at these facts. Jay Bhattacharya comes to mind, and others. And I don't want to get into the debates on that stuff because the science is way over my head. But I do think that one thing we might be able to do to help encourage less herd mentality and more independent thinking is build communities of independent thinkers. Like when you find someone who is an independent thinker, to engage with that person, appreciate that person. If someone has had to engage in some courageous activity in this regard, in terms of facing down a group or whatever, helping them to know that they have support. That group may have scowled at you for doing this, or may have canceled you or whatever, but the whole world didn't. There are people who appreciate independent thinking, and so I think that can be a part of it. Sahar Tartak is here. She's going to be speaking tomorrow. I think she's in the front row somewhere. Yes, she's right here. She stood up to a real irrational push by her school, some of the administrators and teachers at her school, who were wanting to bring in someone who was going to do some kind of social justice program. And Sahar was the treasurer of the school, and she had to sign the check if they were going to do it, and she refused to sign the check. And as the school started, she's going to talk about it tomorrow, and I don't want to jump the gun here, but she got a lot of flack for it, a lot, and she didn't let down. And when I heard about it, and I heard what had happened, and I heard her interviewed about it, she was interviewed by on the Quillette podcast. I called her immediately. I got in touch with her and I said, I want you to speak at the conference. And that's why she's here. Right. So this is an instance, I think, of how we can do that, right? You can, if you see somebody standing on his or her yes. principles, find out who that person is and let them know, hey, you have family, in that way.
I can't emphasize what a difference that has made in my own life when people sort of extended a hand when I felt alone. and how important I think it is to like magnetize those people together. And that is something I spend a huge amount of my time doing, especially when it comes to young people. I just think it's really, really important. One thing we're talking a little bit about, critical social justice, wokeness, whatever you call this illiberal thing. One thing I have realized is, I spent a long time being like one of those angry ladies, like shaking her fist at the sky, like, this sucks, and feeling, if I'm honest, like kind of reactionary against it. And I think one thing that has shifted in a really positive way for me in the past 2 years since I started working on building something new is understanding that like the way to attract people to a movement or a culture or a counterculture or a group is not by being anti-something, it's by being pro-something else.
Amen.
And it's fundamentally by building a better party. Like, if you're gonna tell someone, you gotta leave those other people that claim that they're the cool ones, come here, it better damn well be better.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of like the great challenges for those of us who are trying to fight back against that ideology that's so predominant in so many elite institutions.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very well said. The being against everything, and this in politics, that's all we see. Yeah, there's nothing there. It's even at the deep philosophical level. I've said it many times. The business of being against religion, and I'm an atheist, but I don't make a big deal of it because the atheism is nothing. It just says I don't believe in God. So what? What do you believe in? It doesn't mean anything to me that you tell me you don't believe in God. It's such a trivial point. What we believe in, what's positive, what are the things that we think are worth fighting for, what are the things that we think are necessary for human beings to know and do and embrace in order to live beautiful lives. That's what matters. So, all right, well, we are low on time. I could ask you questions all day.
I feel like we've been here for 1 minute.
I know, it does feel like that, but I think we only have
Or like maybe, do I have sunstroke or we've been here for 1 minute?
Well, we have something like 20 minutes left.
Okay.
And so we do have more time. That's what I want to turn to, because I think it would be rude of me to not, it's 20 minutes exactly. It would be rude of me to take all your time and not share it with any of these
Can you lower the lights just a little so I could see who we're talking to?
Yeah, is there any way to do that? And by the way,
house lights up.
That's better.
Okay, that's better.
And we have
be
mics
brighter in the room, though.
We have mics on both sides, and I'll let you handle the...
you might have to adjust the light levels a little bit after me, but, that's okay.
Before we get going, real quick reminder. Keep your questions to questions, please. They should go no longer
Yes.
That's much better.
Come on, yes. Gorgeous.
Questions should be no longer than 30 seconds, and please no follow-ups, because there are a lot of people waiting. Thanks.
Hi.
Hey, I love your compassion, and I wanted to ask you, how can we teach others forgiveness?
Wow. It is such a good question. Unlike Craig, I'm not an atheist, so part of I'm just so I understand the room, how many in this room identify as atheists? Wow. Okay. We're not going to do the God talk here today, maybe another time. So I'll keep it simple, which is I think about when I've been forgiven in my own life. And I think about the grace that's been granted to me when I may not have deserved it. And that, in turn, softens me to grant that to other people. And I also think that, a little bit it comes back to what we were saying before, like modeling that in the world. I don't know if there's a way to teach forgiveness that's disconnected from a lot of the virtues we've been talking about already tonight. But I love that question. And you shook your head like maybe religion is not such a bad thing. So. We'll talk. No follow-ups allowed, but we could talk. Yes.
Hi, my name is Gabriel. I am one of the leaders of the UJOL, in a youth organization that propagates ideals of freedom through the students' movement, work in schools and universities. would you like to know what you did as young leader, or what do you would do differently, the future impact the community and inspire people?
Okay,
Were you able to make it out?
somewhat.
Okay, I was
what,
not.
what would I advise young leaders, or what did I, can you say it one more time?
Can you repeat, please? You would do different for the future impact the community and inspire peoples in schools and universities?
How do we inspire young people in universities? Is that what I'm hearing? Yes? Great question. Where are you from, by the way?
Brazil.
Brazil, amazing. Wow, that's amazing. How do we inspire young people in universities? I am inspired by young people in universities. It's the first thing I'll say. I am like deeply energized by being around younger people, and I don't know if she's in the room right now, but one of my colleagues is here on this we've been traveling around this week talking to different groups, and she's a 20-year-old student that wrote me a cold email and said, I believe in what you do. And she graduated early and works with me. I can't tell you the number of people that I have like that in my company. And so really, I'll thank every young person in this room, because I feel like if you're in this room and you're young, you're doing it already. When it comes to inspiring, I just think a little bit it comes back to your opening question. I think young people change the world. I think that history shows us that young people change the world. I'm already old, really I am, and I'm getting gray, and I hope I still have the energy left in me, but I just look to history, look at what young people have already done, and feel as powerful as you are, and tune out anyone that suggests to you that you don't have the right, or you don't have the voice, or you don't have the place, because you absolutely do.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, given your experience with the traditional legacy media, maybe specifically the New York Times, and having personally seen, let's say, the good, the bad, and the ugly, do you think that these outlets, such as the New York Times, are worth saving, or is the future in independent, smaller online media and podcasting?
It's a great question. There is a wonderful book called Exit Voice Loyalty, if you haven't read it. And what it's about is the individual's relationship to the institution. I can summarize it for you in 3 sentences. Loyalty is when an institution is working, you're loyal to it. Voice is when an institution you feel needs to be fixed, and you use your voice as a voice of dissent inside the institution to try and fix it. Exit is what I did when I left the New York Times. I see a lot of virtue and a connection between the voice people, many of whom still work at the Times, who I'm in touch with a tremendous amount, and the exit people. And the reason for that is simple market competition. The exit people strengthen the hand of the people inside that are trying to fix the thing. I am not a burn it all down to the ground person. In part, that is because I am now experiencing how very, very, very difficult it is to build new institutions. I'm not talking about doing a new podcast or having an individual newsletter, although that's hard enough. But truly building an institution that's bigger than one of the online gurus that dominate our culture, that is incredibly hard. And so my rule of thumb is, if you can try and save something, save it. But know when it's time to go. And part of it is also an age and a personality question. When I left the Times, I wasn't yet married, I didn't yet have a kid, I didn't yet have a mortgage. I don't even know if I had a credit card. And I don't know if I would have made the same decision now. And so I also don't sit in judgment of people that make a different decision. I will say, though, that there's too many people that are too invested in the idea that, I'll say it this way. There are too many people for whom giving up Harvard or the New York Times or Yale is too painful, and so they don't look the reality of what those things have become in the face. And I do think it's very, very important to look reality in the face and then make decisions accordingly. The last thing I'll say is that, you can't build yet, there's probably a way to do this and I'm working on it, a news organization with foreign bureaus around the world without an incredible amount of infrastructure, legal support, healthcare support, security support, and on and on and on. And so I look at the New York Times China coverage and I'm like, that's why I still subscribe. It's really, really important. But I think we're living in an age that's a really exciting kind of Cambrian explosion. I think we're at the very beginning of what that looks like. I think there will be consolidation in the independent space. I think there will be further deterioration in the legacy space, and I don't think cable news is going to look anything like it looks now 5 years from now.
Hey, Bari, thanks a lot. This was awesome. You sort of half answered my question already, but you got into your resignation from the New York Times. Not Normandy, but pretty brave. And as you said, there are other people in different circumstances, maybe they have kids, a mortgage, et cetera, who can't do the same thing. Yeah. I'd point out, though, that a lot of people experience this sort of world of untruth in a different way from how you experienced it in the outright hostility at the New York Times. A lot of people are just getting the barrage of HR trainings or campus, speech culture, whatever. What do you tell those people, especially people who maybe have obligations like kids, et cetera, how to deal with those smaller level things, maybe none of which reach the level of I must leave now, but are taken together, just you feel like you're being fed a stream of untruths and need to do something about it?
It is a really great question. A few pieces of advice I would give. I was with one, I don't know if the other one's public. I was with a young man, he's probably my age, a few years younger, yesterday, called Dorian Abbott. If you guys don't know his name, look him up. He's a geophysics professor at the University of Chicago. He was set to give a major public lecture at MIT. Maybe you know the story. And
I went to Chicago and I knew of him when I was there.
Okay, amazing. And I love Chicago people. Anyway, and he was supposed to give this big public lecture, and it was rescinded. Why? Because he had the temerity to suggest that people should be hired for professorships based on merit. That's literally all he said. There wasn't like a secret other bad thing. The president of MIT, and I think the provost, ended up like resigning over it, and it was a whole scandal. And one of the things he did in the wake of that was he helped start a group at Chicago. I'm going to butcher the name. I think it's called Chicago Think or Free. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, the Free Thinker. That's correct.
No, the Free Thinker is the publication.
Oh.
But there's another group, and this goes to my answer, which is find the group of like-minded people. It's very, very hard to be the single man or woman standing against the tide. You have to find a gang. Really, not a bureaucracy in an organization, God forbid, but like a gang. And I think that a lot can be done when you feel like you're not alone, and that would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, and this might sound radical, but I was talking to someone yesterday also, I was with a lot of academics who just got a PhD from Cambridge, and there's no way in hell he's staying in academia because he can't stand to be, what's the word they do to geese, gavaged. The lies. He just can't take it. That's literally the antithesis of the reason that he went into the academy. And so he's looking to do other things. And guess what? We live in this golden era, to the question before, of independent media. And he's starting his own Substack that's taking off. And he's starting his own newsletter. And who knows where that will lead. Some of us got together 2 years ago and started a new university. And we're bringing the first freshman class in 2024. So part of my answer has to do with where we started, which is the building of new things. But everyone has to make their own choices, and there are many people doing many, many important things under pseudonyms, and was with some of them yesterday, in private, with their money, and maybe not always in public with their voices. And I think there's room for lots of different ways to be. The only thing I'll add is that, I'll speak for myself here. I really feel like the time is now and the hour is late. I feel that in a very visceral way, that I'm not going to try and convince anyone of that. It's just my personal conviction. And given that, I feel for myself that even though I did not want to become an entrepreneur because I have no experience with entrepreneurship whatsoever, that was what was being asked of me in this moment. And so I would just say to everyone in this room, think about like what the moment calls for, if that makes sense, and then try and meet it. I love that you went to Chicago. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi. Sorry. So you mentioned now, you brought up the topic of free speech, which we've been discussing fairly since yesterday with Eric Daniels. You mentioned that it's been lately associated a lot with like conservative movements, and that we need to protect it as a tool to build our societies. And I agree 100% with you on that. But if we go back to like the arguments used to like censor some speech nowadays, it's basically, I think, divided in two things. It's either like speech that puts at risk our like societal contract and our societal tissue, or it's either speech that's like intolerant, which brings me to the paradox of tolerance, which was presented by Austrian philosopher Karl Popper during the context of like the Second World War. And it briefly states that if a society is tolerant without limit, its ability to be tolerant is eventually seized or destroyed by the intolerant. The idea, it's in order to maintain a tolerant society, the society must retain the right to be intolerant of intolerance. So I just wanted to pick your brain on what you think about that, and where do you think we should draw the line?
I love that. I love that. Can you read the last line of it one more time?
Yeah, sure.
Then we need to be intolerant of intolerance.
So it says, Karl Popper described it as a seemingly self-contradictory idea that in order to maintain a tolerant society, the society must retain the right to be intolerant of intolerance.
I love that. Look, I think it starts with the fact that, as everyone in this room knows, right now in our culture, deeply totalitarian ideas are being sold to us as if they are progress and justice. And we have to be intolerant of the perversion of language that is rendering us unable to like speak to each other in normal ways, and is leading very rapidly to a place in which people that disagree with us are being framed as moral monsters in some way. So for me, like I will say, I try and be a tolerant person. I believe in pluralism, but I am intolerant of ideologies that suggest to me that people shouldn't be judged as individuals, but as avatars of their race or their gender or their social class. I am intolerant of ideologies that suggest that we should judge people not based on their merit and their actions, but on the sins or the virtues of their parents. I am intolerant of any ideology that tries to tell me that someone's identity confers their morality, or that someone's identity makes them an oppressor or an oppressee, or victim, I guess is the word, based on that. I reject that ideology, and I don't care what language it dresses itself up in. But I'll go look up the Karl Popper quote because I loved it.
So thank you, Bari, Craig. It was a pleasure to listen to you. So
Can I just ask, how many countries are represented here? 64? Just Brazil? This is amazing. Sorry, go on. Where are you from?
I'm from Ukraine, actually. Wow. Oh, so you talked a lot. Thank you. Well, you talked a lot about the canceling culture and second chances in case of individuals, but how we should deal with the cultural canceling in the future of nations. So, again, I'm from Ukraine, and the reality is in our country that we have a war now, and so Russians are committing like ecocide and genocide of our like Ukrainians, and our payment for freedom is a human life. So we can give and So do we need to give, or what is most important, do we need to give these chances to those who are like tyranny cultures, and so how we can deal with that, for your opinion? Thank you.
Wow. I don't know if I have the capacity to answer such a deep and vulnerable question. Craig, I don't know if you have thoughts about it first, as I kind of think about how to answer that.
Can I get you to rephrase the question into a brief question for me?
She's saying, how can we, can I say it back, and I want to make sure I understand it?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I was talking earlier about the virtue of forgiveness and wanting to resist the idea of canceling people and giving them a second chance. You're saying, I'm living right now in a country that's at war, and should we be forgiving the people?
In the future, after the winning, I mean, like, do we need to give a chance to the culture? Like, because it was like, Russians do it again. We have a culture, we have a history that they killed our ancestors earlier, and we give these chances for now. And now, so I just wondering, for your opinion, how do you think how we can deal with the canceling, not in case of individuals, but in case of cultures, if we can zoom out?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do have some thoughts on this. I think in the case of aggression like this against a country that is trying to liberalize itself, which I mean, Ukraine isn't, particularly the Ukrainian leadership is not 100% innocent of all wrongdoing, but the country is, relative to Russia, innocent and is trying to move in a more liberal direction. It has been invaded by Russia. Its people have been killed by Russia. And I don't think you should ever forgive the people responsible for this aggression and this slaughter. I think that they should be jailed or shot. I'm against forgiveness in this case. I think that they should be judged, and when found guilty of murder and illegitimate war, that they should be treated accordingly. Now, as for forgiving Russia or Russians, it's not the case that everyone in Russia is backing this war. A lot of people in Russia would rather not have this war going on, I think. And sorting out who's who after all this is done is going to be a difficult task. I think that it's an important task, though. I think over time, it's important to determine who was supporting this and who was not, and punish the people who did, and not forgive, but just acknowledge that the people who weren't involved were not involved. They don't need forgiveness because they didn't do anything, but never forgive the people who came to kill you.
So thank you for your thought. Appreciate it.
Hello, sir.
I'll just add one thing, which is, I don't know if you guys saw this, it connects back to cancel culture stuff we were talking about here at home. The writer, the novelist Elizabeth Gilbert, self-canceled her book because it's a novel based in the Siberian forest about a family under Stalin. And she canceled it because some people said it was insensitive for her to be humanizing Russians at all. And that, I think, is something we need to profoundly oppose.
Absolutely, yeah.
And just to draw a distinction, as you just did, between Russians and Russian culture, Russian dressing, Russian hats, the Russian ballet, all wonderful things, and the people that have carried out this war of aggression. Yeah.
Oh, we have time. Can we take one more? No? Time.
One more.
All right, we'll do one more.
Yes.
Keep it brief.
Okay.
One more.
All right,
Simple
there we go.
question, yes. So, unlike the 18th century, by the way, my name is Dennis, I'm from India. Lovely talk. Unlike the 18th century, where we had philosophers, that people admired and followed in mass. Today, as an unintended consequence, we can say that of consequence of digitalization and internet penetration, we can see literally everyone is an influencer and very often misleading, right? So And they don't need to even know anything about politics or economics or I don't know, whatever they're talking about. They can just simply talk gibberish or just nonsense, but still they are influencers. So doesn't this strongly disputes your statement, your New Founders America needs statement that, a small group of people can influence like a large nation?
I think there's a huge difference between people who actually build things and people who take snapshots of themselves in bikinis to try and sell like vitamin supplements. No offense, I mean, it's a business. But I just think that there's a huge difference between people who are trying to influence and people who are trying to build. Between people who are trying to, self-aggrand, like people that are trying to puff up themselves and people who are trying to do what we've been talking about a little, which is to build new institutions rather than building something that will disappear when you do. And that's what I think like the huge distinction is. Like you're right, we do live in a world where everyone can be in their own echo chamber, following around their own influencer people and like, gurus. It maybe for some people it's Russell Brand and other people it's, Andrew Tate or who knows who it is. You can do that and you can live your life that way, or you can decide, no, my life's about something bigger than that. And I want to build something that won't just disappear when I take down my Instagram or my TikTok account.
Great. Thank you. All right, thank you, Bari.